Hey everyone. Today, we're diving into a story that starts deep, deep underground in a toxic cave and ends up in a high tech lab. And it's all inspired by one of nature's most incredible and, frankly, unlikely architects.
So it all kicks off with this really fascinating question. What could spiders, living in a place that's completely hostile to most life, possibly teach us about building the next generation of sensors? And believe it or not, the answer is a whole lot. So get this, researchers recently stumbled upon something absolutely unique on the border of Albania and Greece. It was a massive, sprawling spider colony inside a sulfur cave, completely cut off from the sunlit world. And we're not talking about a few spiders here. This was a full-blown mega city.
Okay, so let's take a closer look at this unbelievable environment. Because this discovery, it's the real world template for the entire amazing concept we're about to unpack.
I mean, the scale of this thing is just mind-blowing. We're talking about a web matrix covering over 1,000 square feet, home to an estimated 111,000 spiders. And they're living in total, absolute darkness, breathing air that's thick with toxic sulfur. The entire ecosystem is powered by something called chemoautotrophy, which basically means it runs on chemical reactions, not sunlight.
So, you're probably wondering, how does anything even survive in there, let alone thrive? Well, at the very bottom of the food web are microbes that literally eat sulfur compounds. Then, little midges come along and eat those microbes. And finally, this massive spider population. They feed on the midges. It's a completely self-contained world running on its own little chemical engine. But here's where it gets really interesting. This discovery is so much more than just a biological curiosity. As you're about to see, the entire cave system acts like a kind of giant living sensor.
So that's the crucial question, right? How does this natural structure actually sense its own environment? I mean, how do all these individual parts, the webs, the microbes, the spiders, all work together to create a single super responsive system?
Well, it really comes down to two distinct layers, and each one is sensing a totally different kind of signal. First, you've got the huge spiderweb matrix, which is incredibly sensitive to any kind of mechanical vibration, the buzz of a midge or a single drop of water. Then, underneath that, the mat of bacterial biofilm that covers the cave surfaces is alive with electrical activity, conducting tiny currents as the microbes do their thing with the sulfur. The real secret is in that second layer. See, some of these cable bacteria can actually transport electrons over pretty long distances. They basically form what you could call living electrical wires. The entire floor of the cave is literally wired for information. It's incredible. So, as you can imagine, this amazing natural sensor got a team of researchers thinking, what if we could build that? Let's see how they're taking the lessons from this dark cave and bringing them into the bright light of a laboratory. Their goal is to create a synthetic, miniature version of this natural wonder, and they're calling it the web chip. It's designed to mimic those dual sensing capabilities of the spider web and the bacterial mat, all in one tiny device. The way they build it is surprisingly logical. It's kind of like making a tiny, high-tech layer cake. They start with a 3D printed frame, and then they stretch a super fine mesh of spider silk across it. After that, they coat it with a conductive hydrogel, which becomes the home for the bacterial biofilm. And then finally, they place an array of electrodes underneath to read all the signals. Okay, now this is where things get really, really groundbreaking. It's one thing to build the sensor, for sure, but how do you actually read and understand the incredibly complex data that it's producing? See, the real challenge and the true innovation here isn't just about detecting a vibration over here or an electrical current over there. It's about seeing the combined overlapping pattern of both signals at the same time and then understanding what that overall pattern means. To do this, scientists are turning to a branch of mathematics called topology. Now, don't worry, we're not going to get lost in the math here. In this context, just think of topology as a way of looking at the shape of the data, how the different points are connected, where the holes are, rather than just counting individual things. And to measure this data shape, they've proposed a specific new metric they're calling Dust Betty. Essentially, it's a tool they can use to track how the shape of all that combined signal data is changing from one moment to the next. This is the perfect way to think about it. Imagine a puddle. A single raindrop hits, and it makes a distinct circular ripple, right? But a complete downpour creates this complex, chaotic pattern. Well, topology lets the sensor tell the difference between those two events by looking at the shape of the disturbance, not just by counting the drops. And the sensitivity they're aiming for with this thing is just staggering. The goal is to detect vibrations between 1 and 10 nanometers. Just to put that into perspective for you, a common virus is about 20 to 400 nanometers wide. This sensor aims to feel something much, much smaller than that.
All right, so let's zoom out a bit. We have this incredibly sensitive, bio-inspired concept. What could we actually do with it? What are the real-world applications here? I mean, really, why go to all this trouble? Why mimic a dark, toxic cave to build a new piece of technology? What problems can this unique approach actually solve?
Well, the possibilities are pretty exciting. You could create sensors for extreme environments where normal electronics just wouldn't survive. It could totally revolutionize ecological monitoring by detecting really subtle changes in an ecosystem's health. Or imagine a system that could detect tiny contaminants in water, not by identifying a chemical, but by recognizing the unique pattern of disturbance it creates. It's a whole new way of looking at things.
Ultimately, what this all represents is a fundamental shift in sensing technology. We're moving away from just measuring isolated things like temperature or pressure, and we're moving towards understanding the holistic, complex patterns that emerge from the world all around us. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a spider city in a toxic cave can inspire something this revolutionary, what other secrets, what other amazing blueprints for the future are just hidden out there in plain sight, waiting for us to notice?